she abruptly resigned as the host of the show. And to say that I'm quite sad about it is an understatement.
Stephen A. Smith didn't see it coming. Nobody did. His co-host, Molly Qerim, the woman who held down First Take for over a decade, suddenly vanished from the set like a ghost. The face of ESPN's biggest morning show was gone, and this time, it wasn't a contract break. It was a full-blown explosion behind the scenes. Now she's bagged a huge new deal outside of ESPN, and trust me, the network's top execs are furious. But what really went down? Let's get into it. Because this wasn't just a quiet exit, this was a meltdown that shook sports media to its core. It all started on what should have been an ordinary Monday morning at ESPN's Bristol headquarters. The cameras were rolling, debates were flying, and everything looked smooth. Molly was right there doing what she did best and balancing Stephen A. Smith's fire with her calm, confident energy. For 10 straight years, she'd been the glue of First Take, running the show like a pro while keeping those heated debates from going off the rails. But that day, something felt off. Beneath that polished smile and calm voice, Molly was done pretending.
Miss Molly Qerim, longtime host for ESPN's First Take, my day job, where she has been the last 10 years. Last night, she abruptly resigned as the host of the show. And to say that I'm quite sad about it is an understatement.
As soon as the cameras stopped rolling, she packed up her things, no fuss, no warning, and walked straight out of that studio. That moment marked the end of an era. She probably drove home thinking about the endless contract meetings, the lowball offers, and those condescending talks with ESPN executives who kept acting like her value didn't measure up after all she'd done to turn First Take into a ratings monster. The disrespect was hard to ignore, but what she didn't know was that her decision to take a breather would turn into a full-blown media war before she even opened her eyes the next morning. That very night, while Molly was sleeping, a headline dropped that flipped everything upside down. Sports Business Journal's Austin Karp released an exclusive report that hit the internet like a lightning bolt.
Do I have an idea? Of course I do. Am I going to share it with you? No. Because again, that's her story to tell.
She, Molly, put out a statement because there was a report on it, so it kind of got out of our respective controls once that happened.
The headline screamed sources Molly Qerim leaving ESPN, First Take, and boom, her private negotiations were suddenly front-page gossip across every sports site in the country. The story claimed she had rejected ESPN's renewal offer because their visions didn't align, and that she wanted to turn the page after 10 years of running the show alongside Stephen A. Smith. Now here's the twist on. The report made it sound like she was leaving at the end of the year, giving fans and ESPN time to say goodbye. But Molly wasn't playing that game. The next morning, she woke up to find her business all over the internet, and she snapped.
I'm talking about Stephen A. Smith as well, because remember, he's an executive producer on that show, and as he will always remind you, that's his show.
Instead of going to work, she made a move that sent ESPN scrambling, and Stephen A. Smith sitting there stunned on live TV. At 9 a.m. sharp, she took to Instagram and dropped her own bombshell. Her post read, "It is with a heavy heart that I share. I'll be leaving ESPN and First Take effective immediately. Grateful doesn't begin to cover my 10 incredible years here. This show changed my life. To the fans, thank you for the love. To my team, your family, excited for what's next. #grateful. She didn't wait for a press release, a goodbye show, or a farewell montage. Effective immediately, no warnings, no goodbyes. Just gone. One of the most composed, respected women in sports media had just dropped the mic on her own network. Within an hour, her posts racked up over 500,000 views, and social media went absolutely wild.
Perkins just talked about that recently, about how Stephen A. Smith has that pull. Stephen A. Smith even talked about that when he checked Cam Newton recently, talking about, hey, I've hooked a lot of guys up with money around here.
#Molly Qerim was trending everywhere, from X to TikTok to Instagram, and people were flooding the comments trying to figure out what in the world had just gone down inside ESPN's walls. The fans were shocked, Stephen A. was speechless, and the execs, they were in full panic mode, because for the first time in years, ESPN's Golden Morning Show had lost its heartbeat, and everyone wanted to know why. How does someone go from running a live show on Monday to being completely done by Tuesday morning? That's the question that had fans scratching their heads, until the next episode of First Take aired just hours later. there was Stephen A. Smith, sitting all alone at that famous ESPN desk, looking straight into the camera with that stunned, hollow expression, the kind you only see when reality hits harder than a knockout punch. His words were calm and polished, but his face said everything. This wasn't a planned send-off. This wasn't a mutual decision. This was Molly Qerim walking away mid-season right at the height of her career, leaving everyone, even her co-host, completely blindsided. Stephen A. tried to keep it professional, but you could hear the strain in his voice, that quiet disbelief only someone betrayed by timing could feel. This was a man who had worked side by side with Molly for 10 years, debating, laughing, and creating magic every morning, and now she was just gone. ESPN executives weren't just surprised, they were panicking. The network had planned to manage her departure quietly around December, maybe even spin it into a big polished farewell special, but that plan went up in flames the moment Molly hit post on Instagram, and the timing absolutely brutal. It was mid-football season, the busiest, most profitable stretch of the year for ESPN. First Take should have been on fire with NFL debates, playoff talk, and record high viewership. Instead, the network was scrambling to fill an empty seat and explain why one of their biggest stars had vanished overnight.
You can get the money if I sign off on it, or you can get what you want if I sign off on it. But the thing is, he didn't.
The irony? Ratings for that first episode without Molly actually spiked, up 15% year over year, hitting 750,000 viewers. But let's be real, those numbers weren't about football takes or sports analysis. People were tuning in to watch the fallout, to see if Stephen A. would slip up or spill some tea about what really happened. Social media went nuclear. The hashtag #MollyQerim exploded with 2.5 million impressions within hours. Fans were losing it, demanding answers and firing off questions like, did ESPN push her out? And what did Stephen A. know? Roughly 60% of posts showed pure shock at how abrupt it all felt. Effective immediately? That's not just leaving, that's rage quitting on live TV energy. Yet ESPN stayed silent, refusing to comment or confirm anything, which only fueled the chaos even more. But this wasn't some sudden outburst or random meltdown. It had been building for months, maybe even years. Negotiations for Molly's contract had actually started way back in January 2025. Her deal was set to expire at year's end, and what should have been a simple renewal turned into a full-scale standoff. Molly wasn't just another host reading questions off a teleprompter. She was First Take. Under her moderation, viewership climbed 45% from 2015 to 2024.
One thing she didn't mention was anybody by name, including Stephen A. Smith. Now, I've left a show or two before, and trust me, you're gonna name some names when you leave that. Just think about Shannon Sharp when he left Undisputed. Goodness, it took about 10 minutes of all the names he dropped. That's my point. Molly didn't do that. So that lets you know already there's some friction behind the scenes.
Pulling in over 600,000 daily viewers and more than $100 million a year in ad revenue, she didn't just guide debates, she shaped the culture of sports talk television. But when ESPN came knocking with their offer, it was practically an insult. Molly, who reportedly made around $500,000 a year, was offered a new 4-year deal paying between $700,000 and $850,000, barely a bump, with a measly 5% annual increase and maybe $200,000 in performance bonuses. Meanwhile, her co-host Stephen A. Smith was pulling $20 million. That's a 40-to-1 pay gap between two people who built the same show side by side. Imagine carrying one of ESPN's most profitable programs, being Emmy nominated, bringing in record female audiences, and getting told your worth was just a fraction of your co-stars. And it wasn't just the paycheck that stung, it was the disrespect hidden between the lines.
The details, quite frankly, are none of y'all business. But it's not as if I know all the details. There was a contract negotiation that was going on.
ESPN wanted her to be versatile, meaning she'd have to spend 20% of her time on non-First Take projects, women's sports panels, ESPN Plus documentaries, and side gigs that would stretch her thin while keeping her salary capped low. Sources close to the negotiations called it a slap in the face, saying the offer made it seem like she was replaceable, a background piece instead of a cornerstone. But here's the wildest part. While they were nickel and diming Molly, ESPN was publicly celebrating new mega contracts for other talent. The timing couldn't have been worse, and for Molly, it was the final straw. The very same day Molly's shocking exit went public, ESPN conveniently announced a shiny new multi-year deal for NBA reporter Malika Andrews. And that's when people started connecting the dots. Fans instantly began speculating that ESPN had been quietly prepping for Molly's departure long before it happened. And honestly, it sure looked that way. So when that Sports Business Journal article leaked her contract drama to the entire world, that was it, the last straw. After months of back and forth meetings, lowball offers, and subtle disrespect, Molly's patience finally ran out. The leak turned what should have been private negotiations into a public humiliation that she couldn't just walk back from.
She's like, why am I sitting in a situation that I know won't get better? Think about it. You too. Beat it up in the comments. Tell me your thoughts about it. But when you know you need to do something and you know it's best for you, what you waiting for? I think Molly woke up that morning, Tuesday morning, and said, what am I waiting for?
ESPN's president of content, Burke Magnus, tried to smooth things over in an interview that screamed damage control. Speaking to The Athletic, he said, the Sports Business Journal report on Monday forced our hand. Negotiations weren't totally aligned on roles beyond First Take, but we wanted Molly to stay in some capacity. She chose a clean break, and with the story out, it made sense to act now rather than drag it out. A clean break? That's corporate code for we messed up bad and now we're scrambling to fix it. ESPN truly thought they could slow play Molly, stretch the talks, wear her down, and make her settle. But this time, they were dead wrong. Because what Molly did next wasn't emotional, and it was strategic. A pure power move that flipped the script on the entire company, and the fallout, it peeled back the curtain on just how toxic things had become behind the scenes at ESPN. That's when former ESPN host and current podcast heavyweight Marcellus Wiley stepped in and dropped a theory that blew up the entire sports media world. 5 days after Molly's dramatic exit, Wiley uploaded a YouTube podcast that clocked over 1.3 million views in just a week. His claim, Molly didn't just walk away, she played ESPN. According to Wiley, this wasn't a meltdown. It was a masterclass in power. He said Molly knew exactly what she was doing. She didn't want to quit quietly. She wanted to make a statement so loud it would shake the walls of Bristol. Wiley's theory was wild but made a lot of sense. He claimed Molly had grown tired of feeling boxed out, that Stephen A. Smith's massive influence had basically turned the show into his empire, leaving little room for her to grow. So she pulled the ultimate boss move, walking away on her own terms to expose how one man had come to dominate ESPN's entire internal ecosystem. See, this wasn't just about money or contract, it was about power. Stephen A. Smith isn't just another on-air personality, he's a brand, a business, and a one-man boardroom. His current deal with ESPN is reportedly worth $105 million over 5 years, plus another $12 million from SiriusXM. That's close to $40 million a year, putting him in the same league as superstar athletes. And with that kind of paycheck comes heavy pull. He's not only the face of First Take, he's also an executive producer, which means he helps decide who gets hired, who gets raises, and who quietly disappears from the network lineup. Wiley pointed out that Stephen A. had personally helped negotiate better contracts for folks like Kendrick Perkins, Dan Orlovsky, and Ryan Clark, all names who've stayed close to him publicly. But here's the flip side. If Stephen A. doesn't back you, you're done. According to Wiley, that's exactly the position Molly found herself in. She wasn't just fighting the suits upstairs, she was fighting for her place in the system where her co-host had the final word on her future. Think about that for a second. You help build a show from scratch, make it one of the biggest hits in sports TV, become the steady voice that keeps the chaos in check, and then realize your career moves depend on the approval of the person sitting next to you on camera. That's not partnership, that's control, and the pattern runs deep. Just look at First Take's history. Max Kellerman was suddenly pushed out in 2023.
How did he know so much about Shannon's situation? And as soon as Shannon went through that fire, he was the first one on air saying, come on, man, and talking on both sides because of the bosses, because he was in that meeting.
And many insiders said he didn't mesh with Stephen A. Translation, he wasn't part of the inner circle. Shannon Sharpe later joined and also ended up clashing with ESPN's hierarchy before heading back to Fox Sports 1. It's the same story again and again. People come in with energy, ideas, and credibility, but somehow everything still revolves around one man's influence. Wiley's theory painted a brutal picture that ESPN had allowed Stephen A. Smith to become so powerful that even their biggest on-air talents were walking on eggshells. And when Molly Qerim finally refused to play by those rules, she didn't just quit a job, she exposed an empire. But the most damning part of Marcellus Wiley's theory, the timing. and what it exposed about the real relationship between Molly Qerim and Stephen A. Smith, because when someone walks away after 10 years side by side, you expect something, a public thank you, a heartfelt post, maybe even a shared memory. But in Molly's farewell message, there was none of that. No tag, no mention, not even a subtle nod to Stephen A. For two people who practically built ESPN's biggest show together, that silence spoke volumes. And when Stephen A. addressed her departure on air, that only made things weirder. Sure, he was polite, said all the right things, but his tone was cold, his delivery stiff, like a man holding back what he really wanted to say. Then came the infamous moment when he looked into the camera and said, "None of your business," and that line echoed across social media instantly. It didn't sound like sadness, it sounded like frustration, like someone trying to shut down rumors before they caught fire. According to several insiders, that tension didn't come out of nowhere. Their relationship had been cracking for a while. Production records reportedly showed Stephen A. dominating around 60 to 65% of airtime per episode, while Molly barely got 15 to 20%. The woman who once balanced the chaos of First Take had been reduced to a background moderator, a traffic cop, just trying to manage Stephen A.'s endless monologues. It all boiled over during a 2024 episode that went viral for all the wrong reasons. In the middle of a heated segment, Stephen A. interrupted her mid-sentence, snapping, "Molly, I'm talking here." The clip racked up more than 500,000 views online, and fans weren't laughing. The hashtag #LetMollySpeak started trending that same night, and comment sections were flooded with people saying exactly what many had quietly felt for years, that Molly had been sidelined and disrespected on her own show, and the issues went way deeper than airtime. Behind the scenes, sources say Stephen A. had enormous control over what got discussed, who appeared on the show, and which topics were prioritized. Guest bookings, segment choices. Word is, Molly's input was often ignored. She wanted to help shape the direction of First Take, not just mediate the chaos, but every idea ran through one man, Stephen A. Smith. His influence was so big that even producers started defaulting to his vision before she even had a chance to weigh in. Then came the personal comments, the ones that crossed lines. Fans might remember moments where Stephen A. joked on air about Molly's eating habits or her personal life. Some of it was brushed off as banter, but when he referenced her 2021 divorce from former NBA player Jalen Rose, that's when it got uncomfortable, and viewers debated whether he was just teasing or if it had turned unprofessional. According to a source close to Molly, she wasn't laughing. She had privately expressed feeling disrespected, saying those remarks made her seem less credible and undercut her authority in front of millions. By that point, things were already tense behind closed doors. Wiley's theory suggested that the leaked contract report wasn't just bad timing, it was the perfect opportunity for Molly to take control of the narrative. She'd had enough of the power imbalance, enough of being treated like a supporting act in a show she'd helped to make iconic. So instead of letting ESPN spin her exit as a negotiation issue, she flipped the script, quit on her own terms, and left Stephen A. to hold the spotlight alone. It was bold, it was calculated, it said it was Molly's revenge, and the internet went wild. The hashtag #Molly'sRevenge started trending with over 5,000 posts in less than 48 hours. About 65% of fan reactions sided with her, calling her move legendary and long overdue. Viewers started revisiting old clips, dissecting moments that suddenly made sense. The interruptions, the side-eye looks, the awkward laughs, they weren't just seeing co-host tension anymore. They were seeing years of subtle imbalance finally boil over on live TV. But Wiley didn't stop there. His analysis hit ESPN where it really hurt, the structure of power itself. He claimed this wasn't just about two personalities clashing. It was about a system that let one man hold too much control over everyone else's fate. According to Wiley, Stephen A.'s executive status gave him access to high-level decisions, from personnel changes to internal strategy meetings. He wasn't just informed, he was involved. The fallout from Molly's exit didn't just hit ESPN, it rippled across the entire sports media world. Within days, journalists, insiders, and even rival network hosts started weighing in. Everyone wanted to know the same thing: what was really happening inside ESPN's walls? Because when a polished professional like Molly walks away mid-season, mid-contract, mid-legacy, that's not burnout, that's protest. Behind closed doors, chaos had erupted. ESPN's PR team was working overtime, fielding calls from advertisers, sponsors, and board members who were blindsided by the sudden controversy. Internal emails leaked online showing executives debating how to control the narrative before it spun completely out of their hands. One memo allegedly stated, "We cannot allow this to become a gender equity discussion. steer public focus to creative differences, but it was too late. Social media had already turned the conversation into something bigger, a symbol of how female talent gets treated in male-dominated media spaces. By midweek, several current and former ESPN personalities subtly started showing support for Molly without naming her directly. Carrie Champion tweeted, "Sometimes silence says more than any press release ever could." Jemele Hill posted a cryptic message, "Power imbalance looks the same in every industry, it just wears a different suit." Fans immediately connected the dots. ESPN was facing a full-blown optics crisis, and Stephen A. Smith, once the face of their success, was suddenly being painted as the face of their toxicity. And yet, instead of staying quiet, Stephen A. decided to address the rumors head-on, his way. During an episode of his podcast, The Stephen A. Smith Show, he fired back with carefully chosen words that only made things messier. He said, "People can think what they want, but I've always had love for Molly. That's all I'm gonna say. Anything else, and none of your business." The clip instantly went viral again. His tone, his phrasing, his defensiveness, it fueled the very fire he was trying to extinguish. Comments flooded in. "Why so defensive if there's nothing to hide? And you can tell he's hurt, but not innocent." Meanwhile, Molly had gone completely silent. No interviews, no cryptic posts, nothing. Just radio silence while the internet tore itself apart trying to figure out her next move. But silence, as it turned out, was her smartest play. Because while ESPN and Stephen A. were drowning in noise, Molly was quietly closing a deal with a rival network that would mark one of the biggest talent shifts in modern sports television. By early October, Variety broke the news. Molly Qerim signs multi-year deal with Amazon Prime Sports. The report claims she'd be leading a brand new morning program that mixed live sports debate with cultural analysis, basically a sharper, sleeker, next-generation version of First Take. Sources said Amazon gave her creative control, full executive authority, and a salary triple what ESPN had offered. Fans went wild. The same woman ESPN undervalued had just landed a deal worth millions, and the narrative had flipped completely. Insiders began calling it the Molly effect. Female hosts across different networks started renegotiating their own contracts, citing Molly's exit as a case study in standing up for fair pay and autonomy. Fox, CBS, and even YouTube-based sports networks reportedly saw spikes in female-led programming pitches. Molly's decision wasn't just a career move anymore, it had become a movement. But back at ESPN, things were falling apart. The chemistry on First Take was gone. Guest hosts came and went, but the energy never recovered. Viewers noticed immediately. The debates felt awkward, forced, and hollow. Ratings that had initially surged due to curiosity started to nosedive week by week. By mid-October, First Take had dropped 22% in viewership compared to the same time last year. And the numbers kept sliding. Fans online began calling it first mistake. The pressure internally was brutal. Producers were clashing, advertisers were demanding stability, and even executives were divided on whether to replace Molly quickly or attempt a total show rebrand. Some pushed to bring in a younger influencer-style host, hoping to attract Gen Z audiences. Others argued that rushing would only highlight how irreplaceable she really was. One leaked meeting note captured a senior executive admitting, "We underestimated her leverage. She wasn't just the face, she was the balance." Meanwhile, Marcellus Wiley continued to capitalize on the chaos. His follow-up episode, titled The ESPN Fallout, Molly Qerim vs. The Machine, drew over 2 million views in less than a week. He doubled down on his theory, claiming Molly's exit had exposed the unspoken rule of modern media, that power protects power. Wiley pointed out that historically, every time someone challenged the internal hierarchy at ESPN, they ended up out. From Jemele Hill to Michelle Beadle to Rachel Nichols, he said Molly just did it louder. She didn't get fired. She fired them. That quote alone blew up across social media. And then came the rumor mill. Tabloids began whispering about tension that went beyond the professional. Online forums and gossip sites speculated that the fallout between Stephen A. and Molly had personal undertones. Some alleged jealousy, others pointed to long-standing creative control battles. None of it could be confirmed, but the headlines didn't need facts, they just needed clicks. And every time Stephen A. went live, people watched not for sports talk, but for reactions. His facial expressions, his tone, even his pauses were dissected like courtroom evidence. Within ESPN's walls, morale was collapsing. A few anonymous staffers spoke to Front Office Sports, describing the environment as walking on eggshells. One source said, "If you say the wrong thing about Molly or Stephen A., you might as well start packing your desk." The atmosphere had turned paranoid, with internal Slack channels reportedly being monitored for leaks. It was no longer about sports, it was survival, but the real twist came when Molly finally resurfaced. After nearly a month of silence, she appeared in a feature interview with The Hollywood Reporter. Sitting in a cozy New York studio, calm and composed, she didn't throw direct shade, but her words carried weight. Sometimes growth means walking away from something good that no longer makes you feel valued, she said. I'm proud of what we built, but I'm even prouder of knowing when to start over. That line hit like a lightning bolt. Within hours, the clip was all over social media again, pulling in millions of views. Fans hailed her as a role model, and the press labeled it the quietest mic drop in sports history. Even her new show, which hadn't aired yet, became one of Amazon's most anticipated launches. Meanwhile, ESPN tried to bury the story under football highlights and NBA coverage, but it was no use. The damage was already permanent. Executives at Disney, ESPN's parent company, held emergency meetings about public perception recovery, and insiders claimed morale was so low that even other on-air personalities started questioning their contracts. For the first time in over a decade, Stephen A. Smith's dominance wasn't seen as power, it was seen as problematic. His once unquestioned authority now looked like the symbol of imbalance, and if you thought that was the end, you'd be wrong, because whispers started circulating that Molly wasn't done with ESPN just yet. Word leaked that she had retained top-tier legal representation to review whether her previous contract negotiations had involved gender-based inequities or internal bias, a move that could open a can of worms ESPN desperately wanted to keep sealed. So in the span of just a few weeks, Molly Qerim went from being seen as the calm, composed moderator of First Take to a media disruptor, shaking an entire billion-dollar network. Her departure exposed cracks in ESPN's foundation that executives had ignored for years, and as new reports hinted at more behind-the-scenes tension, fans couldn't help but wonder, if this is what's happening in public, what secrets are still hiding behind those studio doors? Because one thing was now clear, this wasn't just a resignation, it was a revolution. Wiley said Stephen A. often knew about staffing moves before they happened and could advocate or quietly block a colleague's career advancement. Think about that. A co-host with access to the same decisions as upper management. That kind of influence doesn't just shape a show, it shapes careers. And in that system, Molly's decision to walk away wasn't just an act of frustration, it was rebellion, a way of saying, you may control the show, but you don't control me. And that's what made the whole saga so explosive. Because in one move, Molly Qerim didn't just leave ESPN, she exposed it. This kind of power setup is dangerous. Plain and simple, when one person holds that much sway, it forces everyone else to play politics instead of just doing their jobs. Talent ends up trying to please their co-workers, not the audience, and that kills creativity fast. It's a system that rewards favoritism, not hard work, and that's exactly why Molly's exit hit ESPN like a wake-up call. If you enjoy diving into this wild behind-the-scenes story, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, because the drama in sports media is just getting started and you won't want to miss what's coming next.